This is a podcast from the Times. Is a podcast from the Times. Is a podcast from the Times. Go to thetimes.co.uk.
The Bugle, audio newspaper for a visual world.
Today, Andy, is the final edition of the News of the World, the notorious British Sunday tabloid paper. It will be missed by people who like to knowingly or otherwise have their faith in humanity drained out of them every Sunday. Otherwise, it will not be missed at all. If you managed to avoid this story over the past week, Buglers, then congratulations, but you might want to put some plastic clothing over your soul now before you hear about it, because you're about to wade into some depressingly murky waters. Just when you thought this story couldn't get any more disgusting, new revelations emerged that were even more sickening. Following this story was like walking through a fetid sewer, consoling yourself with the fact that things couldn't get any worse, and then having a pile of shit dumped on your head. In full disclosure, as you referred to earlier, Andy, this podcast is presented by the Times of London, a sister paper of the News of the World. I will say that I do not believe that they have been listening in to Andy and my conversations over the last few years at all. To be honest, they can't have been doing that, otherwise I don't see any way that they would still be allowing us to do this.
So Rebecca Brooks has, the former editor of the News of the World at the time when the now defunct ex-crap rag did not so much scrape the barrel of investigative journalism as detonate a landmine in the barrel, then use industrial mining equipment to dig down several hundred metres underneath the barrel just to make sure they hadn't missed anything.
Is this on? Is anyone still hearing this? The latter half of the week saw the attention turned to the seemingly non-platonic, grubby relationship between News of the World and high-level British politicians.
That is so far from platonic. I mean, I'm not saying it's romantic, John. I think it goes the other side of romantic, into essentially the relationship between a businessman and a prostitute down the back alley of a seedy nightclub.
I'm not saying, Andy, that Rupert Murdoch's face does not look better with a shaving cream pie in it. It complements it perfectly. But there's a time and a place for doing that, and it was emphatically neither then nor there. You just don't want to find yourself with any misplaced sympathy for Rupert Murdoch. Hello? Is this thing still on? I can't work out why this microphone is still working, Andy. Hello? Is anybody listening to this? How are Andy and I still doing this 3 weeks on? Hello? Should this not have been stopped by now? This doesn't make any sense. Hello? Hello? Rupert Murdoch set the tone at the start of the day by interrupting his son to say, "This is the most humble day of my life." Now, for a start, that's clearly relative, and I can't... Hello? Hello? I can't help thinking that he was using a word he'd heard rather than referencing an adjective that he'd actually ever emotionally experienced. Hello. 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 I can't... Andy, this microphone's working. There's some problem here. And these revelations also led to Rupert Murdoch and his son James being summoned to appear in front of a House of Commons inquiry board next Tuesday. The problem was that they're not British citizens, so that was not legally binding. And initially, Rupert Murdoch declined to appear, basically sending an RSVP saying, "Oh, what a lovely invitation. I was so glad to receive it from the court-appointed messenger who placed it in my hand. Sadly, I will be unable to attend due to a prior engagement of not being anywhere near your stupid f***ing inquiry. I hope it all goes well and that you all have a lovely time. Go f*** yourselves, Roop." So... later, reports came out alleging that he'd also claimed he couldn't make it because he was, 1, allergic to panels, 2, was too shy, and 3, had actually died in 1994.
Oh, you like that business, Daddy? Johnny's acting up again. Johnny's acting up.
I'm not backing down, Murdoch. I'm not backing down. The chief sub-editor, Alan Edwards, said, "It's a paper that's been part of British culture for 168 years, and frankly, I think we've been victims of a witch hunt by some newspapers, and I hope they're happy today as they dance on the grave of a British institution." Well, you know, to be honest, they probably are, but... to be fair to them, some graves are worth dancing on. You know where we are! You know where we are! Come and get us!
Don't come and get us.
Well, Andy, the News of the World scandal has deepened this week, taking all the attention of News International staff. I presume that's the case, as they definitely can't have had time to listen to the Bugle last week. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be doing this right now. The relationship between politicians and News International has been a truly dysfunctional marriage over the years, and perhaps many people should have seen a scandal like this coming. Just listen to the wedding vows that they gave each other years ago when Murdoch first took control of those papers. Do you, News International, take this esteemed political body to hound and to investigate, to hack and to harass, as long as you shall be in print? And do you promise to do this with a poor command over the English language, and to undercut the gravity of any actual stories you may stumble over by placing them next to a picture of a celebrity in a bikini? And do you promise horoscopes? I do. Very well. And do you, political body, take this paper to prostitute yourself in front of, to cower in fear of, and curry favour with, as long as you shall remain in office? And when doing this, will you make sure that it compromises your ability to best serve your constituents, as well as compromising every principle you've ever held close to your heart? And will you take steps to ensure that this relationship is at best troubling, and at worst, criminal? I do. Very good. Therefore, with the powers invested in me, I hereby pronounce you two an accident waiting to happen. You may hound the bride.
How do you like them apples, business daddy? How do you like it? I bet you don't like those apples, do you?
So as you said, we are still here, which means, well, possibly means that no one in News International listens to the Bugle, or that they do listen to the Bugle, but they've been a bit busy with other stuff this week, and they're going to catch up shortly. Will there be a Bugle next week?
It's out of our control, Andy. It always has been. When you bite the hand that feeds you that hard, you can expect at the very least a verbal rebuke.
Yep.
Well, welcome to any first-time buglers who are here because they might have read the New York Times story on us earlier this week. Basically, the story was questioning how on earth Andy and I were able to get away with saying the things we did about Rupert Murdoch during the phone hacking scandal without this podcast being dissolved, which is a legitimate question. I'm guessing the truth is that he was never aware of it. But now that the story's in a newspaper that I'm guessing he reads cover to cover every day, I'm thinking there's an even smaller chance of us managing to not get fired now. So Thanks very much, New York Times. Your trumpeting of this podcast may well turn into bugling the last post. I guess what I'm saying is, to our new listeners, hello and goodbye.
I'm Andy Zaltzman, live in this tumultuous, shocked city of London, which is still digesting the news from this week. That's TimesOnline and the Bugle are getting divorced. And in New York City, it's John Oliver.
That's right. Hello, Andy. Hello, buglers. Set your clocks to history. I'm afraid that we have to start this Bugle off with some bad news. The Times has decided to drop us after 3 years, or was it been 4 years? Anyway.
50 months, John.
50 months.
Years.
50 whole months and 176 episodes of some of the fastest flowing bullshit this side of an industrial crop sprayer. And not just any crop sprayer, Andy. I'm talking about the Farm Fertiliser 5000. It has been a remarkably long relationship that we've had with the Times, Andy, and clearly for them, it's run its course. It's no one's fault that the relationship has ended, and it's definitely not ours. And the Times has essentially sat us down and looked us straight in the eyes and said, it's not us, it's you. Clear out your things. I never want to hear from you ever again. As for what the future holds for the Bugle, as you say, Andy, it's hard to predict. The problem is going to be that it's strangely not actually cheap to produce something that's quite this worthless. Most other podcasts are done by people just verbally vomiting into their laptops and uploading the detritus to iTunes. Unfortunately, Andy and I currently live 3,000 miles apart, so we have to hire 2 studios, 2 engineers, plus employ Chris to put it all together, and he costs about £1.2 million a year in cocaine alone. That kind of commitment takes a lot of bankrolling, and just imagine how many phones you have to tap to be able to afford that. Let us go out! Let us go out on our own terms! Hello?
Hello?
Is this on? Hello?
Is this on? Murdoch clearly sees us as the one that got away, or the one that he's probably never heard of, and that he had to let go because he had to divert funding to more important core parts of his business, such as paying Jude Law, paying Jude Law's wife, paying John Prescott, paying the families of murder victims, paying... I think I've made my point. What are you going to do, Murdoch? Fire us. Stay strong, Buglers. I mean, it's a tough time of year to have devastating news like this, but just try and, for the sake of your families, don't let it ruin Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no need for it to.
Yeah, don't let News International steal Christmas.
Yeah. Andy, I cannot believe this is still on. Any breakup is hard, Andy, and it's always tempting to lash out at the other side's flaws, to hurt them as a way of, kind of conquering your own pain inside. But it's important not to do that. So on that note, I don't know about you, Andy, but I'd like to wish News International nothing but the very best in the future. Fighting their court cases for phone tapping. I wish them the best, Andy. I mean that. I wish them the best. The best will probably be some kind of gigantic out-of-court settlement. Certainly not a not guilty verdict, because the whole thing stinks to high heaven. But all the best to them, Andy, in their future endeavours.
But the larger point here is OAN would be literally nothing without AT&T. An OAN accountant reportedly said under oath that AT&T provided 90% of Herring Network's income. And as for OAN's horrendous content, AT&T told us DirecTV respects the editorial independence of the channels it carries, just as AT&T is committed to providing editorial independence for every Warner Media show, including this one. And that is such a relief, especially the last part, because if I may, I'd like to use that generous editorial independence to offer some constructive feedback to AT&T. Take its recent campaign, More for Your Thing, That's Our Thing, which is respectfully complete gibberish. It sounds like Yoda pitching a penis enlargement device. It is so nonsensical, I have to assume something was lost in communication, which actually would be a much more appropriate slogan for the company. And if you don't like that slogan, AT&T, don't worry, I've got more. How about AT&T, all the business savvy of Quibi without the courtesy of committing corporate suicide? Or AT&T, if you run a cable out the back of your headquarters and plug it into T-Mobile's networks while they aren't looking, that's legal right, asking for a friend. Any of those are all yours if you want them. And look, AT&T, I know our relationship is a little awkward, especially since you're trying to spin this business baby off in your deal with Discovery. But while we are still technically related, let me just say this. You're a terrible company. You do bad things and you make the world worse. Please don't bother keeping in touch once the merger's complete, although that really should not be a problem for you. You're AT&T. It's not like your messages will go through anyway.